Back in 1893, Powell, Tennessee, was your typical quiet mountain hamlet, nestled along the banks of Beaver Creek that 104 souls called home, untouched and unknown by the outside world. It was here that a young boy named Eli Phillips grew up and learned about the world. Now, Eli was your typical 12-year-old mountain boy with a mop of curly brown hair that seemed to have a life of its own and bright eyes filled with curiosity. Folks in Powell knew the boy well for his adventurous spirit, often exploring the woods and the banks of Beaver Creek from dawn till dusk. Now, Eli's pa was a skilled craftsman who spent his days fastening mud from that same creek into bricks that were sold to townsfolk in nearby Knoxville. One crisp morning in early spring, as the mountain air still carried the last whispers of winter, Eli noticed a rustling at the edge of their property, and as he approached, from out of the bushes trotted a dog. Now, it was clear that he hadn't eaten in days, maybe even weeks, and it was even clearer that this poor creature was homeless. The animal was of no particular breed that Eli could tell, with a coat patched in browns and blacks and eyes that held a gentle weariness. Eli knelt down, extending a hand and whispering softly, "Hey there, fella, you lost?" Eli asked, as the dog cautiously approached, sniffing the offered hand. There was no collar, just a thin, frayed rope loosely knotted around its neck. The dog's tail wagged hesitantly as Eli gently patted his head. "You look like you could use a friend," smiling as the dog warmed up to his touch. Just like that, Eli decided to call the dog Coy, after the way the dog had coyly peeked out from the bushes. That evening, Eli brought Coy home, where his pa saw the animal for the first time. "Whose dog is that?" the father asked. "Well, I reckon he's mine if you'll let me keep him, Pa. He just wandered up today, and he's been following me around ever since," Eli replied. "Well, whatever you do, don't feed him. Then we'll never get rid of him." "But Pa, that's just it. I don't want to get rid of him. I've been needing me a good hunting dog. Can I keep him? Please, Pa. I'll just feed him scraps from the dinner table until he fattens up, and then he'll start chasing squirrels. You'll see." Eli's father bent down and took a good look at the animal. "Well, I don't reckon anyone will come looking for him, 'cause I dang sure ain't been feeding him. And he's got clear eyes, and his paws look pretty stout. But I tell you this, dog, you're gonna have to earn your keep around here." And just then, Coy let out a muted bark, as if he actually understood, and the mountaineer pondered the dog's response for a moment, and then he spoke. "Well, all right, Eli, you got yourself a dog." The young mountain boy quickly gave his paw the biggest hug he could muster. "He'll be a good dog, Pa. You'll see." In the days that followed, Coy accompanied Eli everywhere on his explorations. The dog proved to have an uncanny sense of direction, and a good nose on him too, treeing coons and flushing quail. The bond between the two grew. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, communicating through looks and gestures, as if they shared their own secret language. Eli taught Coy commands and tricks, while Coy showed Eli hidden spots along the river and in the forest where the wild berries grew thickest and the fish bit the hardest. About June of that year, Eli took Coy with him to go camping for the weekend on Beaver Creek. The weather looked promising enough, but you see, storms in these mountains, now they have a habit of popping up without little warning, and they can be intense. And as the two friends set out that morning, Eli noticed that Coy seemed a bit reluctant, with his ears twitching and his eyes fixed upon the sky. "What's wrong with you, boy? I go camping all the time. Ain't nary a thing gonna happen to us. I'll keep you safe, don't you worry." But what Eli didn't know was that a storm was brewing on the horizon, and it was about to test their friendship and Coy's bravery in ways that Eli had never imagined. By noon, Eli and Coy had been wandering along the banks of Beaver Creek for hours. The water was calm and glistened with the reflection of the summer sky. Occasionally, Eli would pause and skip a couple rocks across the surface, laughing as Coy barked and chased after the ripples. "I bet you can't catch this one, boy," Eli teased, throwing a particularly smooth stone that sailed far across the water. Coy darted along the bank, his eyes fixed on the splash, before looking back at Eli with a playful growl. And as they moved further downstream, it soon opened up to reveal a wider section of the creek, bordered by large, flat stones perfect for sitting and watching the world go by. So the two copped a squat and ate some berries that Eli had found along the way. While they ate, Coy's keen senses noticed a cool change in the breeze, and the temperature began to drop, and he let out a soft whimper. Just then, Eli took notice of the rustling leaves and the clouds that began to roll across the sky. "Looks like we might get a taste of rain, Coy. That'll cool us off right nice like." Coy perked up his ears, but his body was tense as he sniffed the air. His nose was twitching at the scent of rain and something else. Something that made him uneasy. Despite Coy's apparent anxiety, Eli was reluctant to head back home. You see, Beaver Creek had always been one of his favorite spots, and Coy, however, seemed to sense danger more acutely, and he began to pace back and forth, whining softly, his eyes never leaving the darkening horizon. He nudged at Eli's hand with his nose, a clear sign of his discomfort. All right, we'll go in a minute," Eli finally conceded, watching the first flashes of lightning as they streaked across the sky, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. Yet, you see, the storm was moving way faster than the young mountain boy realized, and what begun as a simple camping trip between the boy and dog was about to take a drastic change. As they packed up to leave, the first heavy drops of rain fell, patterned loudly on the leaves above, and within moments, the wind began to pick up, sending shivers through the trees. Eli picked up his backpack and slung it over his shoulders, as Coy stayed close, with his body pressed against Eli's leg. "All right, Coy, let's head home. It looks like this might get rough." Together, they hurried along the trail alongside of the creek, but the rain quickly turned into a downpour, reducing visibility and transforming the dirt into a slippery mess. Without warning, the stream of Beaver Creek that had once been a trickle was now swelling into rushing torrents, cutting off their usual route back home. "Coy, I know another way. Follow me, boy," Eli shouted over the roar of the wind and water as the mountain boy set out down a new narrow path that was even closer to the water. And within moments, the unthinkable happened. Eli, his foot caught on a hidden root that was slick with rain as he slipped and fell. With a shout, he fell towards the surging creek that was now a small river. And in an instant, Coy was right by his side, his teeth gripping the back of Eli's jacket and pulling with all his might. But Eli's grip on the slick, moss-covered rocks was precarious at best, and suddenly his heart was pounding against its ribs as the thunder rolled out above. Coy, with a determination that belied his size, held firm, with his paws scrambling against the wet rocks. His eyes were fixed on Eli, filled with an unspoken promise to not let go as the cold water lapped at Eli's feet, pulling at him greedily with swirling fingers. "Hold on, Coy! Hold on, boy!" Eli shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. But the river was relentless as Eli slipped closer and closer to the edge. In that instant, Coy adjusted his stance, planting himself as firmly as he could against the rocks, his muscles straining under the effort. He pulled again, harder, his body shaken from the strain. And Eli, feeling Coy's pull, managed to crawl slightly upward with his fingers, digging into the mud as the rain hammered down. Just when it seemed that Coy's strength might fail, Eli's hand found a jagged rock above him, and with a desperate lunge, pulling himself with all the energy he had left, as Coy kept a grip on the boy's jacket. Together, they clambered up onto a small patch of earth that rose above the swollen river. And there they collapsed, with their chests heaving, soaked to the bone and trembling, and not just from the cold, but also from the adrenaline that was still rushing through their veins. "We made it, boy," Eli gasped, wrapping his arms around Coy. They were safe, but it wouldn't be for long, as both of them soon realized that the patch of land they were standing on was now an island, cut off from both banks, with water raging around both sides as daylight began to give way to darkness. All through the night, the storm continued its relentless assault on the small island where Eli and Coy were stranded, as it was slowly succumbing to the swollen river. Torrential rain pelted the shrinking patch of land, and the once sturdy boulders around them were obscured by the rising, angry waters of the roaring river. And just then, the dawn began to break. Somehow, they had survived the night, and Eli knew they couldn't wait any longer. "We gotta swim for it, boy," his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. Coy, sensing the urgency, responded with a determined bark, his body tense and ready. And as the last pieces of their island were swallowed by the river, Eli and Coy leaped into the churning waters, battling against the currents. And for a moment, they were together, side by side, standing against the fury of nature. But the river was merciless, and soon Eli and Coy were torn apart by a powerful surge. Coy, with his strong swimming abilities, managed to reach the near bank, clawing his way up the muddy shore as Eli was swept away in the rapids downstream. But the faithful dog's eyes tracked Eli as he was swept away by the current, and in an instant, the dog was racing along the bank, keeping pace with his friend. With all his might, the dog ran, fighting to get ahead of Eli, just up ahead where there was a curve in the river. Once the animal got there, he spotted a large, fallen limb near the water's edge, and Coy grabbed it with his teeth and desperately dragged it towards the bank. Pulling with all his might, he tossed one end of the limb over the bank and into the water, just as Eli reached out his hand and grabbed a hold tightly. "Pull, Coy! Pull, Coy!" he shouted, with the river's roar nearly drowning out his voice. And Coy tugged at the limb with all his might, his paws digging into the muddy bank for leverage. And inch by inch, Eli was drawn closer as the water fought back, splashing and swirling around him, trying to reclaim its hold on him. And with one final desperate pull from Coy, Eli managed to grab a tree root on the bank and clawed his way up through the mud. And as soon as he was within reach, Coy gripped the back of Eli's jacket with his teeth and helped pull him to solid ground. Somehow, the dog had saved the boy's life. From that day on, Coy and Eli were inseparable. There was no closer bond than what those two shared. Coy had proven his worth to Eli's father, and the once homeless dog was surrounded by love for the rest of his life.